On the topic of the recession that we're in, how much of the current subprime mortgage loan crisis is due to just the natural ebbs and flows of the economy, and how much is due to predatory lending practices, gullible home buyers, and maybe just uninformed public? How much is due to the natural process, and how much was man-made in a way?
This subprime loan scandal was the product of the Fed and the Securities and Exchange Commission not doing their job. That's just for a beginning. But let me go back. And I know about this because I'm the chairman of the Domestic Policy Subcommittee of the United States Congress. I was the first member of Congress to hold hearings in this area and to go deeply into it, into all aspects of it. So let me share with you some of the dimensions here. First of all, when the Community Reinvestment Act passed in the mid-'70s, it was brought forth and passed because lending institutions were gathering a lot of money from communities, but they weren't loaning it back to the communities. Instead, they were essentially exporting the capital. What I did as mayor of the city of Cleveland, I was the first mayor in America to effectively enforce the Community Reinvestment Act so that banks and lending institutions had to put some of the money that they gathered from neighborhoods back into those communities. That's what the act was about. In the ensuing years, there was very little enforcement of the Community Reinvestment Act. The Fed has admitted as much in testimony in front of my Domestic Policy Subcommittee. What that means is that people who lived in inner city areas in particular, but some in the suburbs, did not have access to loans when they needed to buy a home. So these lending institutions cooperated in creating other products called subprime loans. And they made these loans available to people who otherwise weren't being given an opportunity to borrow under the prime rates. And as a result, people were able to get loans without documentation, without proving they could repay it. The appraisers weren't scrupulous in their practices because they actually often inflated the value of the home. The mortgage company booked a higher value to the loan. Their portfolios were gathered all around the country and then offered as part of hedge funds, which saw extraordinary growth without any transparency or regulation. So the Fed didn't do its job in seeing the Community Reinvestment Act enforced, nor did they do their jobs looking at the banks loaning massive amounts of capital to these hedge funds, fueling further growth in Wall Street. The Securities and Exchange Commission didn't do its job in protecting the investors. And they continue not to do their job because when the hedge funds offered initial public offerings, the small investors are in great peril still. I'm the only candidate for president who not only understands this, but who is politically independent to do the following. First of all, there needs to be a RICO-type action. Criminal prosecution of all those people who were involved in knowingly creating this system. Secondly, all those who are, there has to be a moratorium on foreclosures. And people should be able to pay a market value rent for their property during the period of the moratorium so they don't lose their homes. There has to be a cause of action at a state level where attorneys general can file action on behalf of the people within their state to recover the money that was gained through fraud by these mortgage companies. And unfortunately, Congress took action that stopped the states from having this right of recovery. I mean, that's just an opener. As President of the United States, I'll see to it that the Federal Reserve, which fancies itself as independent, does a real job of enforcing the responsibility of banks. I'll see that the Securities and Exchange Commission protects investors. And anyone involved in this fraud is going to be prosecuted. So no, this wasn't something about a normal cyclical of a housing boom bust. This was engineered by people who were making great amounts of money. It's had an effect on this country, an adverse effect on our economy, and an adverse effect all over the world.
Well, certainly the subprime problem is a stimulant to a number of part of the situation. But you look at the foreclosure numbers around the country today, and there are a good many people, I think responsible people, who attribute most of those foreclosures to the popping of the housing bubble, not to anything on the subprime front. So, yes or no?
There's a complex of things. Let's talk about why are people having financial trouble? Okay, people are maxed out on their credit cards. Number one, you know, the growth in the credit card industry paralleled a tremendous advertising campaign. People were pushed to get the plastic. They weren't always aware of the rates. They maxed out. You have a lot of people that are in financial trouble because of that. People have to take responsibility for that, but we also have to understand that it's a fact. Wages have been essentially flat. Okay, people haven't been able to keep up with the increased cost of energy. That's been a significant matter, and there's been a sharply increasing cost of health care. The health insurance, if you have it, the cost of health care if you're uninsured, cost of prescription drugs. These are all factors. Okay, a lot of people saw their money in their housing, and they started to take out loans from their housing too. They used their household bank account. Okay, well, they didn't know, a number of them, that their adjusted prime rates that they bought at some point were going to put them upside down. So they had more debt than the house was worth, which is, you know, ergo you end up with these situations with the massive amounts of foreclosure. We've had an economy that hasn't really been regarding the economic needs of the American family. So what would I do about it? First of all, this plan for a not-for-profit health care system is central to the economic vitality of America and the American family. Secondly, the plans that I have to get the economy moving again will help people, will help lift up wages. Third, we have to look at our energy policies that are sapping our ability to grow. Reliance on oil, coal, and nuclear are good for those industries, but they're not good for our country. I want to transition away to wind and solar. Let me give you an example. Under this Works Green administration, we'll create millions of new jobs. Designing, engineering, manufacturing, installing and maintaining wind and solar microtechnologies on tens of millions of American homes, dramatically lowering our energy footprint and reducing our energy costs. See, in this way, we start to look at those areas of the economy where people's budgets are getting hurt the most and give them some breathing room, because people need that right now. There may not be another candidate for president who understands this in a way that I do. I still live in the city of Cleveland, in the inner city, in a house that I bought in 1971 for $22,500. I'm not immune from the kind of same problems that other families have in terms of the people in the neighborhood. I understand what people go through. You know, I can open my door and I'm right on the sidewalk, okay? It's not a gated community. It's a house that has about 16,000 square feet, okay? I live the same way people live. I understand what people go through.
You mean 1,600 square feet?
1,600, thank you. That's somebody else. Thank you. That's somebody else. Yeah, that's 1,600 square feet. It's that's another candidate that has a big house. But the idea is that I'm close to what people live with, and because of that, I can be a president who identifies with the mass of the American people who are aspiring to a job that's good paying, to a roof over their head, for health care, education for their children, retirement security. These are practical aspirations that people have. And because of my 40 years of experience in politics, I'm a very practical person. I mean, I look at the practical impact of what we do on people.